Acts 24, Paul's going to appear before Felix. Remember, he is on trial for causing up dissension. Really what's happening is the Jewish leaders, just like they did with Jesus, the Jewish leaders don't like that Paul is preaching basically against their understanding of the Old Testament and religion, and he's telling people to follow Jesus. So it says 5 days later, Ananias, a high priest, arrived with some of the Jewish elders and with a lawyer to present their case against Paul to the governor. Remember, the governor, he's not Jewish, but he's the one that is going to have to make some of these decisions because the Jewish leaders didn't have the authority to just, put Paul to death. Now, I'll let you read this for yourself, but here's what Paul says, starting in verse 10. The interesting stuff to me comes here in verse 14. He says, I admit that I follow the way, which they call a cult. In other words, the Jewish leaders said that this wasn't true. It wasn't a true faith. And so he says, I worship the God of our ancestors, right? He's trying to connect into, the Jewish faith because Christianity, of course, is rooted in the Old Testament, right? He says, I firmly believe the Jewish law and everything written in the prophets, right? So he's not saying I'm some sort of revolutionary, right? I'm not trying to say the law is bad. He says, I have the same hope in God that these men have, that he will raise both the righteous and the unrighteous. It's interesting here. He's referring back to that controversy. Remember that Pharisee and Sadducee controversy. The Pharisees believed in resurrection from the dead. The Sadducees didn't. Of course, Paul is just using all of it as a bridge to the gospel because resurrection is pretty important in terms of a biblical understanding of what Jesus did. He rose from the dead. Someday we will as well. Paul talks about that in some of his other letters. But let's scroll down here to verse 24. And this is interesting. It says, a few days later, Felix came back with his wife, who was Jewish. Sending for Paul, they listened as he told them about faith in Christ Jesus. And as he reasoned with them about righteousness and self-control and the coming day of judgment. And you can imagine that probably some of that stuff that he's talking to them about are the things that you read earlier in the reading plan in, say, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, or the books to the Corinthians. But it says, as he did that, Felix became frightened. He said, go away for now. When it's more convenient, I'll call for you again. So apparently, I'm sure that the self-control talk didn't frighten Felix, but maybe the coming day of judgment was too much for Felix to understand. But it's just interesting. It says here in verse 27, after 2 years went by this way, Felix was succeeded by another governor. And because Felix wanted to gain favor with the Jewish people, he left Paul in prison. So normal people would say, oh, this is terrible. Paul spends 2 years in prison now. But I think we get the sense that Paul took it in stride because he understood that he was on a journey, and not just a journey to Rome to, by the way, be executed. He didn't maybe know this right now, but he's on a journey of telling people in whatever situation he's in, whether free or in chains, telling people about Jesus. And that is exactly what he does, even for these 2 years. So anyway, you're ready to read chapter 24. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 25.